from the South. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. This is not new. I've experienced it firsthand. And it's nice to see all of these people out here, but I want to see them take this energy to work every single day. To say Black Lives Matter to their coworkers, to their managers, to their bosses. This is nice to run in the street, but it's a lived experience. It needs to start here, but continue every single day.
The issue of this treatment of students, budget cuts facing schools, is that part of the systemic problems that we have in this country?
Absolutely. It all contributes to the problem. It's been going on for a long time. 400 years of this sort of systemic problem.
In the schools here in San Francisco, what issues do you see as serious affecting racism and discrimination in schools?
Well, right now we're dealing with a lot of budget cuts, which isn't helping because not every school is treated fairly and equally when it comes to the funding that's there to begin with. We have the problem of the bus systems aren't picking kids up and taking them to the right places that they need to go, and so a lot of those students who really need that aren't getting it. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons that we're out here today.
And I mean, there's 75 billionaires in California, San Francisco, or 170, and 75 in San Francisco. What does it say that you have all this wealth yet kids can't survive, teachers can't survive?
It's a capitalist system based on keeping the money, keeping the poor people where the rich people think we belong. That's what this country's been doing for hundreds of years. So it's going to take a lot of work to change that. It's going to take a long time to change it.
You think people are waking up in this country?
I like to think so. I think people have been awake for a long time, but it takes so much effort to get more people sort of coordinated and headed in the right direction. And like you were saying, there's so many people out there with so much money that kind of own the legislation and the things like lobbyists and stuff who really kind of squelch any efforts that the rest of us are trying to do to make things better. So take one step forward, 3 steps back sometimes.
Came out here to defund as a way to stand against police brutality, against systemic violence, against the attack on Black lives. And so what we are here is to really take a stand. I mean, this is beautiful, all of us, but for me personally, I'm here as an action to defund police, to define a new world, to be here for the change, that enough is enough, or we're done. Police are not the trusted servants of the community, bottom line. So I'm here to...
Who do the police represent?
Police are the slave catchers. Police are the original terrorists of this country.
It seems like we spend in California more money for prisons than for education.
Exactly. It shows our values, right? I mean, it's a national across the board of what do we value more? A militarized hyper police state or education free knowledge for all? It's wrong.
And the politicians, Democrat or Republican, continue to fund the police. San Francisco, I mean,
But San Francisco, I'm not too familiar, and you might want to check in with in terms of actual demands. I know on a national front to defund, but a lot of institutions have contracts with police. And so we're asking institutions locally and nationally to step away, to defund, to not partake in the systemic violence, because that makes them bystanders. And if you are a bystander, then you are still guilty of murder.
Where are you from?
Born and raised in San Francisco.
You go to school here? What kind of work do you do?
I went to City College of San Francisco.
They're starting to close that down too.
I know, and that's what politicized me. And so that's when I really...
In this city with all the wealth, and they're closing down City College.
Right. And so, so that's what, I went to City College, and then I went to UC Berkeley, and I'm still here for now.
Rosa? We're here because things have just gone on too long. It's really encouraging to see so many people out here and to really see a lot of people who are finally getting it, that the police are a harmful force in society. They target black people, but they're harmful to all of society.
The fact that they spend more in prisons in California than on education, is that where the priorities are in this country?
Right, we need to defund the police. And that's one of the demands that are out there that I think are strong and powerful. Yeah.
What does this mean? Why are people here?
What
His death.
does it mean to me? It means a lot to me because he shouldn't have been treated like he was, and I really feel like all people should be treated equal. I say black life does matter. Everybody matters, not just black lives. Everybody matters, but it seems like it doesn't make a difference whose life is at stake. They just wanted. I just feel that the police was just very, very negligent, and by them giving him second degree murder, he should have got first degree murder, and even the other four should have got first degree murder because they were access to his murder. And I mean, it had me in tears. I couldn't believe that they did this man like that. And his last words were mama. You know, it really hurt me. It frustrates me, you know, to see this. And I want to see people come together and, you know, and stop fighting each other, you know, stealing from each other, treat each other with respect, you know, give love, not hate, you know. We
Been of students, budget cuts facing schools. Is that part of the systemic problems that we have in this country?
Absolutely, it all contributes to the problem. It's been going on for a long time, 400 years of this sort of systemic problem.
In the schools here in San Francisco, what issues do you see as serious affecting racism and discrimination in schools?
Well, right now we're dealing with a lot of budget cuts, which isn't helping because not every school is treated fairly and equally when it comes to the funding that's there to begin with.
ML King Middle School.
I'm sorry?
ML King Middle School, Malcolm X Academy, with co-location with the charter school.
In the Bayview, yeah, and so we have that problem. We have the problem of the bus systems aren't picking kids up and taking them to the right places that they need to go, and so a lot of those students who really need that aren't getting it. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons that we're out here today.
And I mean, there's 75 billionaires in California, or 170, and 75 in San Francisco. What does it say that you have all this wealth yet kids can't survive, teachers can't survive?
It's a capitalist system based on keeping the money, keeping the poor people where the rich people think we belong. That's what this country's been doing for hundreds of years. So it's going to take a lot of work to change that. It's going to take a long time to change it.
You think people are waking up in this country?
I like to think so. I think people have been awake for a long time, but you know, it takes so much effort to get more people sort of coordinated and like headed in the right direction. And you know, I think when like you were saying, like there's so many people out there with so much money that kind of own the legislation and the things like lobbyists and stuff who really kind of squelch any efforts that the rest of us are trying to do to make things better, you know. So take one step forward, 3 steps back sometimes, you know.
What's your name?
Vashti.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
We want to all work for the school district.
Which school?
I work here in the Castro Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy.
Yeah, a couple of conversations, Sean.
My name is Brenda. We're just here trying to, you know, support everybody. Everybody should care about human rights and about, you know, whatever this is. And it's not okay that black people are being murdered by police at a very high rate, and they're more likely to die at the hands of police than any other people.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just here for support.
Thank you.
More. Got it here. Somebody lost their soup.
Somebody lost their soup. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Well, thank you, folks.
What kind of work do you do?
What was that?
What kind of work do you do? Student or teacher? Or?
Oh, I work in a restaurant. Yeah, and a student.
Surviving with the restaurant industry and surviving
Yeah, trying to.
with the depression in the restaurants. I mean, that's
Yeah, no, it's been pretty hard, but you know, we're still doing takeout and everything, so we're doing okay, hopefully. Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Daniel. Sister there.
It's a liberal city, and we're fortunate to be in a more liberal city than other cities, but still, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in 50 years.
Well, I mean, it sounds like there are going to be major budget cuts, the financial crisis. How is that going to affect the present situation if there are already inequities and diversity of treatment?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know enough yet. I think we don't know enough about what's going to happen with the budget to speak to that, but it's a scary thought. We certainly can't lose funds. We definitely, more is better, more is quite necessary.
And you have all these billionaires in San Francisco, 75 billionaires, and yet there's students, the teachers are suffering.
Yeah, let's hope that teachers and counselors and mental health are not services that they choose to cut, so we'll see.
And the trauma that children are going through now, African American, Latino children, is this a daily occurrence for them, I guess? This is really what's happening now. I mean, that is part of the stress.
Be aware of that and teaching with that in mind, and we try to be trauma informed, and it's not fair for kids of color, so that's why we're here.
Dre. So I personally, I'm from Alabama. I flew out here from Alabama, right? My buddy, he's out here. But police brutality is a part of a long history in America. And some can correlate it back to the lynchings of my people and my ancestors. But it's an injustice, and America is an imperialist. It's a sexist. It's a fascist. It's just a terrible regime, and the people and the younger people, millennials and people of the generation Z, as they call it, are tired of police brutality of black people, and that's what it is. That's what it boils down to. This is bigger than George Floyd. This is bigger than Breonna Taylor and Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and those that come before her. This is a culmination of 400 years of oppression, of being oppressed. So this is a long history.
Well, you think the system profits from racism?
Absolutely, absolutely. You have things like prison, the private prisons, the schools. They base how many prisons they need to build off inner city schools, third grade levels. So they look at children's third grade reading levels, and that determines how many prisons they need to build. So the prison pipeline complex is real. And also whether it's Latino people or anybody, this is what it is. America is a capitalist society, and that's what it boils down to.
And 42 million unemployed. There's a depression coming. I mean, it seems like it's going to get much worse for people in this country.
The market's been crashing for a while now, and I just don't think the media is reporting it as much. But that in itself, 42 million Americans, they should be in the streets right now protesting to go against the capitalism that has a stronghold on the American population. So,
education. How has education been affected by racism?
So I grew up in inner city school, right? Like I said, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, the mecca of civil rights. If you take something like the resources that you may have in an affluent white neighborhood, it may not be the same in the inner city. I can't speak for other cities, but I know for my city, you may take a city like Birmingham where all the schools are failing except for one. But if you go across the mountain, there's a Vestavia, there's a Mountain Brook, there's a Homewood. There are 3 or 4 predominantly white schools that have the resources to give their students the proper education that they need to go on to college and compete with the rest of the world. So education is definitely something that people should look into. That's what it is, man.
And privatization, charters, destruction of public education.
Yeah, that could be traced back to like to the 80s. Like Ronald Reagan literally took money from education and other government assistance programs to combat the war on drugs, which disproportionately affected like black and brown people. So like we know this, and it's written. So, any more questions?
Are you in a union?
No, but I am a black scholar, and I study African American studies. So, and I attain. So, that's me.
What's your name?
Dre.
Nice meeting you.
Same, man.
I'm Jess Turner.
And what kind of work do you do? What kind of work do you do?
I'm an internist. I work in the emergency department and then do some hospitalist work.
And you're here today in San Francisco to protest the death of George Floyd. What does this mean to you, and why do you think there's been this mass outpouring in the United States?
I think there's a lot of pent-up grief and anger and frustration with feeling like we just haven't seen the progress that we'd hoped to see over generations. I know I wasn't alive in '68, but in many ways I've reflected on that time and asking my parents about kind of what they were going through at that point, what they were doing, and I think the pain of seeing that we've come, a couple of generations beyond that point with seemingly so little progress, and the more we know, the more we see that there needs to be fixed and needs to be changed.
And do you think that these protests will change it?
I think that there's several points of value here. I think some is one of expressing solidarity and frustration and building movement, and I think that those are essential steps then towards working towards other practical change, whether that's us as individuals and the ways that we can work to kind of break through our own racism, which we may or may not be conscious of, and then also kind of working for more systemic change, whether that's on the voting booth or in small groups that we happen to be in, or what those might be.
Healthcare, it seems like with COVID, there's a real disparity of death and the situation of African American Latinos. Is that part of the systemic problem?
It absolutely is. I think that that's one thing that we see on a day-to-day and year-to-year basis that has come to be thankfully get some press and be in such a stark contrast. The huge health disparities that we see that come along with being a historically marginalized group in the U.S. Black people, Native peoples, all sorts of those who don't necessarily come in with the same sorts of means and access to care.
And healthcare workers, there have been protests about the lack of PPE. What does it say about the United States at this point, the richest country in the world? Maybe now with China's changed, but the fact that we're not prepared, we don't have the health PPE. Have you been affected by that?
Certainly at points myself and certainly a lot of colleagues have been nervous. We've been fortunate in San Francisco to usually have at least a few days buffer of supply, but it's been awfully thin and we're using it very differently than we typically would. I think it does, maybe as much as anything, it speaks a little bit to our eye of looking at systemic problems and prevention. As far as how that segues into this moment, I guess could be how we think about underlying structural issues and how those then have their trickle-down effects.
This private ownership of healthcare?
I think that I certainly have plenty of stuff to say about private ownership of healthcare that I think is pertinent. I think a lot in this moment, both private and public, I felt like sort of fell a bit short as far as I think this took foresight and taking steps early on. So being prepared years in advance, but also I think when you have the first whiffs of opportunities to prepare yourselves to take action at that moment. And unfortunately, we missed the ball on that a bit.
I mean, Korea, Taiwan, China were able to overcome this. What is it about the United States that we're behind these countries in protecting the healthcare workers and the population?
So, protecting healthcare workers has been a problem. That was a problem in China, at least initially as well. I think that there are some benefits that come towards being able to mobilize large groups and national industry and those sorts of things that we don't have here, for good and bad both. I think there are ways that we can work around that and still have a fairly liberal society. I think as much as anything, kind of us figuring out how we're going to have greater access to testing and contract chasing and people being on the same board and having an idea for messaging and unanimity as far as how we can respond to kind of keeping each other safe will make some of the differences going further.
I'm here because I believe in the cause.
What do you say that something like this is happening today in the United States, 2020?
I think it's ridiculous that black people have been fighting for their rights for over 400 years. It's been 60 years since Martin Luther King was killed, and we're still here because, here, come here. No, you want to speak? You don't want to speak? Okay. Well, this is just ridiculous that we even have to be here today, but I'm proud to be here and I stand with everybody. Samantha?
You go to school?
Yeah.
Where do you go to school?
I go to Whittier College in Southern California. Yeah. Thank you.
Have resources, so it doesn't just end at the protests, so they have actionable items to take home with them so they can continue doing the work once they leave here.
You think this is going to be the beginning of a mass movement in this country?
A mass what?
Mass movement.
I definitely do. It's completely different than the other times. I think people feel this more deeply. A lot of my friends who were never vocal before are now vocal, and they understand the pain of the community. So we have a lot more allies that are behind us that are helping to engage and push the movement forward, not just in the streets or for the police, but in the workplace as well.
What has to happen in the workplace?
Well, the workplace, first, it has to acknowledge the part that it plays. Diversity is definitely a big key. I mean, I worked at companies and they didn't have any diversity resources or anything like that, where I was the only African American. So definitely working towards realizing implicit bias within the workplace and microaggressions. I'm not sure what that looks like myself, but definitely reaching out to people who are aware, doing the work, finding training programs for employees, especially C-level executives, because a lot of them tend to have more old school ways of thinking, so that definitely needs to, it's subconscious programming, so you have to break down that programming, and that takes work. So, I mean, part of it is just looking at these resources. There's anti-racism resources within this document that definitely executives who are not in the community, not African American, which is almost all of them, should take accountability to do the work and look at these resources.
Doesn't the system profit off of racism? I mean,
it does. That's one of the issues. So what I'm working for now in the initiative, it's not in there right now, but it's a link that calls out companies that are profiting off of prison labor. And I think definitely as a community, we need to hold these companies accountable, and we have to stop giving them our black dollars if they don't respect our black bodies. So it starts with putting pressure on them, sending email templates. You see them sending email templates to a lot of organizations. So we need to start with the ones who are exploiting our community and benefiting off of it. I mean, the school to prison pipeline is definitely an issue that we don't talk about. They definitely don't teach it in schools. So it's not only starting with prisons, it's starting with the education system. The way that history is taught today, it creates systematic, or it creates implicit bias within children. When I was in elementary school, the way history taught me, I felt as a little black girl, I was inferior to the white people because they created this nation. That's not the way history should be taught. I shouldn't be made to feel like my history is just slavery as an African American. I didn't see any positive history for African Americans until I got to college. Not everyone goes to college, so not everyone's going to get that exposure to just how great African American culture is. And again, that's an issue with cultural appropriation. People don't realize the greatness of African American culture because it's been bastardized and seen as American culture. We don't get credit for it. So people just see us as criminals and what they put us as in the media, and we don't get the credit for, you know, the beauty that we bring to this country. I mean, rock and roll and jazz. I mean, jazz has been, you know, black people don't own that. We don't have authority over that anymore. Most jazz artists who are making money aren't in the African American community. So how do we fix that? How do we change this? There's so many different levels